So hello friends, good evening to all of you. In the last class, we have discussed about two important concepts, and basically we were discussing the types of parameters. In that, we have already discussed two types of parameter. One was the request parameter, parameters. Second one, you can say, that is servlet config parameters. That also we have discussed. These two things we have discussed, fine. And also we have seen how we are receiving the data of request parameters as well as the servlet config parameter. The third one, what we are going to discuss, is the servlet context parameter. So these things which is there here, that we have discussed it here. Now in these topics, if you are having any questions, if you are getting any doubts, you can please ask. You can write it in the chat box. If any doubt, anything comes here, you can please write it in your comment box if you are getting any doubts. Okay. So hope so you don't have any questions from this above topic. Now, well, we will talk about today, which is the servlet context parameter, and also we will understand what is the servlet context parameter is. What exactly servlet context parameter? Like the way we have studied the servlet config parameter, that what exactly servlet config parameter is. So servlet config parameter, the data what we are specifying in the servlet config parameter is going to be a private data for that particular servlet, but it is common for the corresponding user of that servlet. That's what we have talked about, and that's what we have discussed about the servlet config parameter, and based on that, well, I have written some examples also, and that we have discussed it into this. Well, in these cases now, if you are getting any kind of questions, any kind of doubts, you can please ask. No questions? Any questions if you are getting, you can please ask. No questions. Well, fine. Now, what next we are going to talk about is servlet context parameter. We are going to talk about. We are going to discuss about the servlet context parameter. So when I ask you what is servlet context first, so let me explain first what is servlet context. Servlet context is an interface. When I say it is an interface, so it must be available inside some specific package, which is java.x dot servlet. We are saying it is here. In this particular package, it is available, right? Fine. And if it is an interface, then the implementation of the methods which is available inside this corresponding interfaces means, you can say, implementation of servlet context interface will be provided by the vendors of that corresponding, you can say that is the, depends whoever is implementing it, they will write that implementation of this. Now here when I say, when I talk or when I usually discuss about this Servlet context parameter, so you must be getting one question that where do we need to specify this Servlet context parameter first. So I'll come to that point where we are going to specify the Servlet context parameter. But before that, there are some more specific things which we need to talk about. Fine. So what I'll do now, I'll open the command prompt, and immediately after opening this command prompt, the very first thing what I will do is that I'll set the class path. And now you can guess which class path I am going to set here. So this is the class path which I have written here. And when I am writing this corresponding class path inside this case, so depends, like if you have installed the Tomcat Apache inside this, now you will get inside the lib, there is one Servlet API.jar which is already available inside this. This is the Servlet API.jar which is already available. So I'll do one thing, I'll copy it and I'm just writing here Servlet/API.jar as such I have written here. Fine. And when I have written here something, so I need to understand the interface or the API of the Servlet context. Well, what is the API of the Servlet context? That is one more important thing. And see, instead of discussing any theoretical part, so before starting with any of the theoretical part, what we can do here is we can understand exactly what all the different things which is available in the Servlet context interface here, right? So that's the reason I have set the class path for the Servlet API.jar. And now in that we will see, we are writing javax dot servlet dot servlet context. Well, I have written here. Now you can have a look on all these, such a big API. And now here the problem what you are going to get if we don't go in this manner, then whatever trainings you are taking, any faculty will show some 10, 15, 20 methods to you. How we are going to use that methods, and based on all that methods we will write some programs, you will understand the things. But till the time you haven't gone through these API, in future maybe whatever we have discussed in the class, apart from that you are getting some other requirement. In that case, it will be very difficult for you to analyze that problem and to use which sort of methods or which kind of functionalities you wanted to use from the Servlet context or any of the corresponding API which is there either in any of the cases, including that is core Java, or when you talk about Struts, Spring, Hibernate, in there also are lots of different kinds of APIs. So now associated with a Servlet context, you have this number of tasks. Methods represents what? It represents some kind of operations. Operations means the number of methods which is available inside the Servlet context or in any of the corresponding interfaces. That many different kinds of tasks that corresponding API will be able to do. Fine. So whenever you are trying to write any program, whenever you are trying to use any sort of existing API, what you should do is directly you should open the API and then you should see, okay, this particular problem could be solved by using that method also, or depends on your requirement that how you wanted to solve that. So if we open this API, we will be able to understand the things very clearly. Let's say, for example, I'll just tell you some basic examples. When I'm talking about get init parameter, there is one method. There is one method called as get init parameter. So by seeing this method itself, you can tell the complete story about this method. By seeing this method itself, you can tell the complete story about this method. How you are going to use it, what could be the return type. So if it is the return type, what value it is going to be return to the corresponding user, what parameter it is going to take. Every sort of things you can easily explain in that. In meanwhile, when you are writing here get init parameter names. So when you are talking about get init parameter names, let's say here, this is what you have written here, get init parameter names. So method name itself represents that the number of values which is there, and it is coming in the form of enumeration, and with the enumeration here we are using string also. Something called a generics, we have used it in this case, right? So see, now you know where should we store the return type, how we are going to get the things, how we are going to get the means, all these sort of things you are going to get it inside this. So you are getting any kind of questions in this, then you can ask with this. Now I'm coming to the next one in this. So Servlet context which is there, Servlet context type of, or you can say I'm specifically making it categorically here, that the Servlet context object, when I'm saying, when I say object, so definitely it is an interface and we won't be able to create the object. So that story we have discussed previously in the case of JDBC or in some other cases. So Servlet context here, it is it is a type of object. It is that corresponding type of object. Servlet context type object here I'm saying. I'm not saying anything else. I'm saying here very simple, which is Servlet context type, because that is the corresponding interface is being implemented by n number of, or means different vendors are implementing it and they are overriding that implementations. So in your jar file, what classes, what subclasses you are going to get, it depends. So I'm not going into that at present. So this is what the Servlet context we are at present we are talking about. Well, I have written here the Servlet context type of object, right? So here this Servlet context, so question is how many? So this Servlet context object which is there will be created only one for a web application, and it will be shared with all the servlets. Getting it? This is a very simple thing which I have written in this case here. Fine. So what next we are going to talk about is where we need to specify this, the Servlet context, if we are writing or if we are talking about, where we are going to write this Servlet context here, right? So now for this there is one tag we need to write in web.xml. When I say web.xml, so I'm not talking about the annotation part of the Servlet, because when you are using Servlet with the help of annotations, that is a separate representations and separate implementations that we can again discuss later on. Fine. So in this case, directly inside the web app, web/app when you are writing. I hope you are familiar with this. This is the web app, something which you have written. I'm writing this is the web app. So in this particular web app, directly you are going to write context param. What you are going to write is the context param, and that's what we are going to close it here, which is the context param. I'm going to write it inside this. Here I'm writing the context param. Okay, and in this itself, the value I'm going to write. This is what we are calling it as a context parameter, and here itself we are going to specify these all things. Fine. Well, so I'll do one thing. I'll just open this example, what we have discussed previously in the last classes. Hope so. You are aware with this all. So just let me go into the complete detail of the processing of this one. So here you just have a look in this web.xml. What we are having here, see, this one, what we were having, it was the init param or servlet config parameter, we can say here. But see, again, when I talk about this particular one, so this config parameter, when I say this is the config parameter, it was very specific to the login servlet itself, and at the same time this login servlet data or this login servlet config parameter, we were not able to access with the sign up servlet. And that, well, I have already shown you, and maybe while you are practicing it, you would have observed this also. And I have discussed it again the number of times. Means the last classes videos also has been shared with you all, which is in the private form. And the links already might be there with your mail IDs. So please go through that. Okay, now I'll do one thing. Say here now. Understand one very basic thing here. The one which is particular to that corresponding servlet that we are writing inside that field. And when I am writing another data, so let's say, see this servlet, if I have something to write with this one, I'll write here that config parameter. But at present, I'm not specifying any kind of config parameter data. So I wanted to write here, what is that? Something called as the servlet context. So here I'll write here. Just a second, which I'll write here, that is the context parameter. Well, I have written here the context parameter, and in this context parameter I'm just going to write something called as the init or something called as the param name. You see here, param name in the sense what? You are going to specify the parameter name. So, well, I'll write here the param name as well as the param value. Param name, what you want to write, it is your choice. So, whatever you feel, let's say country I am writing. Country which could be common for everyone, for all the servlets. So, let's say I am writing here that is something called as the India. Country name which is there, that is the India as such I have written inside this. Now, in this one, you make it clear guys here that the one which I have just written here, this is the Servlet Context parameter, and the second one when I am writing is the Servlet Config parameter. This is the two things I have written inside this case. If you are getting any questions, any doubts regarding this, you can make it clear what is the context parameter and what is the config parameter. Now, here what is the next one? I'll just try to do here. See, as I said, the context parameter which is there is common for all the servlets. Well, so either it could be the login servlet or it is going to be the any kind of servlet. In both of the cases, we are going to access it. So let's say I have written here something called as the login servlet. See here first. Understand here one thing. I'll do one thing in this. This email, something you have written. So what I will do now, guys, I'm just printing in this something. Email I have written. This is the email, and you remember one thing, we have written sc dot servlet config dot get init parameter. We are accessing here the init parameter, and that init parameter we have specified for the login servlet itself, so that you can access into the login servlet itself. Other than that, you cannot access in other servlet. Remember that point. Now in this one, what I will try to do here is, first of all, we need to understand how do we access the, remember my point, guys, how do we access the Servlet context object, how to get the Servlet context object, because you are going to get the value which is in context parameter. This value you are going to access from the Servlet context parameters itself. So I must have to get first, or I must have to understand how do we get the Servlet context parameter. That is one question here. So see, if you will open the API properly and you will try to understand properly, if you are trying to get the things properly, so say here, that is one thing which we are having at present, which is this one. We have this get servlet name, get servlet context, get init parameter names. These all methods we are having. So if you understand the simple Java also, so what you will find in this and what you will understand in this, guys, the one thing what you can understand is servlet context. What you are talking about is the servlet context. So see, it is a method get servlet context, and this method which returns the servlet context type of object, and we were talking exactly about this. So this get servlet context method can give the servlet context type object, and through which we can access the different parameters. So I am going to do that only. What I'll do here now, sc servlet context dot get. Say here, all the options are available with you. Which one you wanted to call? So we want to call get servlet context. What we want to call? Get servlet context. So that's what we have called here in this. After calling this servlet context here, so what I'll do now in this, I'm writing a very simple one. Servlet context, I'll write ctx is equal to, this is one kind of reference we have created here. Well, and now guys, you will see that we have now received the type of servlet context object here. Fine. Now one question, okay, the main objective which I'll show you first. So now I'll write here, what is that I'm going to write now? ctx dot get, you see here, what all the methods? So get attribute. Yes, we are just trying to get the attribute here in this. What is that attributes which we are trying to access here in these cases here? Or you can write here one more thing called as the, which is in Servlet, get init parameter. What is that init parameter name? Can you please tell me? You must have to write this same name as it is, which is in country. So that country name I am writing here. Country I have written inside this. This is what I have written now, guys. And now when you are trying to understand these things, you can easily get the solutions of your problems or solution of what we were discussing here. Well, so see, I'll just run this program. Well, I'll trying to run it. Okay. Okay, I have written it now. I have just I did it in this case. Let's go for the login once. You can just see what we have written in the login. I'm just telling for you itself, and every step I'm trying to revise from the previous concepts also. One form which I have created, and for that particular form, you will find here the login.jtc. So login.jtc, where you have written login.jtc. Let's go for this in the servlet mapping. Login.jtc login. It is the login servlet what we have written, and here is the init parameter we have specified into this cases. Correct? So well, let's do one thing here. See, I'm writing hello and hi, something I have written. I'm just at present running it. Maybe something it is giving, that is the password or username is invalid and something short of things it is giving. But you find one thing here, see. What was that first? som@jtcindia.org. This was what? A mail ID, which was an init parameter, sorry, Servlet config parameter. But at the same time, India was in Servlet context parameter. And that we are able to access, guys, here. In meanwhile, if I'll write here something, I'm just writing here hello, and on sign up I'm clicking here. So I'll do one thing first. Okay, so for that, let me do some exercise here, or let me do some kind of basic changes into this. I'll just stop the server. Every time try to do all these things and make this in your habit, that when you're stopping. So because lots of changes when you're doing, it will perform some, you can say, some of the changes it is performing, and in that case, it may help you a lot. So see here, in the sign up servlet, few things which we are going to understand here. See, the very first thing is the servlet context, something what we are having. Let's say I'm writing here sc dot get parameters, get init parameters here. And when I'm writing the init parameter here, so what was the parameter what you have specified here? So see, that particular parameter will not be available for the sign up servlet, because that we have written it for the, that this one email which is there will not be available for that one, because you have written it for the login servlet. And this is going to be available for that particular one itself. It will not be available for that. So well, here what I will do now, sc.getInit parameter. So well, I am writing here the email I am writing, and well, I'll just write it into the string of email, and here in the simple form I am writing that is the email I am writing. Well, it's a simple thing which I have done here. So I'll run it and inside this now, have a look now. Here you see I'm writing hi, something hi, I'm writing sign up I'm doing. See here, I'm doing sign up, but when we were talking about that email, so it is giving here null. Why it is giving null here? Because that value itself is not available for that, and that's the reason it is giving the null. Did you understand one thing? But yes, you can do one more thing. The same thing you can as it is copy it, and you can, what you can do here, you can specify for this Servlet context parameter inside this email, and here you see I'll write something ABC mail ID. So this data is for the now sign up servlet, and which is not available for the other one. So I'll just make one very simple thing clear. I'm writing something. Okay. So it's starting. Well, we have now here hi, something values I have given, sign up I'm doing. Now you see that ABC @ JTC India, we are getting it here. Fine. The value I have just highlighted it here. Meanwhile, what you can do here is in login servlet we have written something here. The same code, what you can do is you can copy paste it here, because that is the common thing. Here the same thing as it is I'll be taking here, guys. So in the Servlet context, what I will do now, I have just copied it inside this case. So I'm writing Servlet context ctx is equal to sc.get Servlet context. And when I'm writing these all things, so well, what we can do in this is I'll try to run it now, and immediately after doing these all things, I'm just doing the sign up. You will find one thing here, see, the common data which was the Servlet context parameter, and that Servlet context parameter we are able to access here, and as well as something when I'm writing abc @ jtcindia.org. So that was a private data, and that is particular to that particular servlet itself. So guys, is that clear to all of you? Any questions if you are getting, please you can write in the chat box, you can write in the anywhere, wherever you want, you can write it there. Any doubts, any questions if you're getting, you can please ask. I have explained about the Servlet context parameters. Related to that, I have given few examples in your documents. You can please go through that, different examples also, different sort of examples well I have given into that, so you can go through that, right? Any questions if you're getting, you can please ask now. No questions? Is that all of you are there or sleeping? Why we write again and again context parameter? We are not writing it again and again context parameter. Where I'm writing? I haven't written here, you can see. I have not written any context parameter again and again. See here where I am writing. I am not writing anywhere. I have written only once. This context parameter, and which is common to everyone. They are all able to access all these things. We are not doing anything. What? No, sir. Okay. In Sublet class also we have not written again and again. See, this is another servlet. That was login servlet was the another servlet. In this we are accessing its own context parameter. It's your choice. You want to access it or not. So that's the, I have just for displaying it or just to show you, I have just written like that, and that's what I have shown it to you. Your question is not clear here. Okay, the next one inside this is now, anyone, Ahmad, what you want to write one time? Write in Hindi itself. Would you want to write one time? I am not writing more than once. I am for a particular servlet. I am writing once only. For a particular servlet, I am writing once only. I am not writing more than once. So see guys, servlet request, servlet context, servlet config, these all things are hope so clear to you all. One more thing what you can do here is, I'm just printing guys here, and just kind of test you can do. Just a second. So I'll write here, that is SC, and in this case I'll write here, that is the CTX, something I have written inside this, and immediately after this we will see what it is printing exactly. I'm just writing here a few things. Well, I'm running it. Anything, I'll just write it. You see, these all are the subclass. One for the servlet config it was, and this is for the application context facets for the, which is an subclass which is implementing it. So apache.catalina.core, something like that here. So this is what I have shown it to you. So I'll do one thing. For you now, I'll leave it for you to practice the things. There are number of examples associated with that I have given in your documents. Please go through that examples, practice it properly. Fine. And again now, next topic is our servlet lifecycle that I will start from the tomorrow. Meanwhile, I'm expecting from all of you that you will practice the things properly and you will do it so that you are not having any questions. Okay. Rest of the things again we will discuss tomorrow. We will talk about the servlet other things tomorrow. Thank you. Any questions if you